So we're glad that you're here tonight for our SaltLakeCity.net user group meeting. We hope you enjoyed having August off, and we're glad to be back in the swing of things here in September during the school year. We do want to let you know that we are evaluating some options for meeting in person again. Our current plan is to look at in-person meetings starting again in January. So we are also looking at some of our options to be meeting in person, but still bring in presenters who may not live in Salt Lake City and be able to stream content across the net to other people. So, or to people that are outside, and bring presenters in who can stream to us in a local area. So you can consider that at least the beginning of the welcome. So we do have a YouTube channel, and we would like it if you would subscribe, smash that like button the way everybody talks about when they talk about YouTube. There are most of our recent past presentations are available on the YouTube channel. So if you missed a meeting in the last couple of months, you're welcome to go to the YouTube channel. You should be able to find some excellent content there. You can ask questions or leave comments using the chat feature. We will be trying to monitor the chat feature here on Teams. Hopefully everybody's going to stay on Teams, because I'm not sure that we'll make that I'll be able to monitor both Teams and YouTube. But chat on Teams is going to be the best. You can, yes, I think somebody posted up a message. Can you post non.net related front end positions? Yes, you can post any position that you're aware of that you think somebody in this group might be interested in. So that's available to you. And I also, probably, if you can hear a little squeak, I have a little 9-pound dog that just decided to join me for the meeting, and he's got the one toy that he hasn't broken the squeaker yet. So hopefully he'll quiet down a little bit. About our speaker tonight, Rob Richardson. He's a software craftsman building web properties in ASP.NET, Node, React, and Vue. He's a Microsoft MVP, published author, frequent speaker at conferences, user groups, and community events. He's a diligent teacher and student of high-quality software development. He has many other presentations. In fact, if you were here a few months ago, he presented to us on doing local development with Kubernetes, and we're happy to invite him back, and we would urge you to follow him on Twitter or X or whatever we're calling it these days, at Rob Rich. And we're pleased to have him here today for minimal APIs in ASP.NET Core. And with that, we turn the time over to Rob.
Excellent. Let me share my screen. So here's the part where I tell you I am definitely going to post the slides on my site tonight. But in this talk, there are no slides. It will be completely all live demos. So that'll be really, really fun. You can get to the content that we'll see up on GitHub. GitHub.com/RobRich will get you there. Minimal APIs, ASP.NET. Or head off to robrich.org, click on presentations here at the top, and here is minimal APIs with ASP.NET. And if you want to see me talk tomorrow, I'll be speaking at the Utah JS conference. I'll do a definitive deep dive into .git folder, and you can take a look at that. So there's the code that we're going to look at today. While we're here on robrich.org, here's the link to all my socials. Feel free to like and subscribe. Had to go there. Or let's click on About Me and see some of the things that I've done recently. Thanks for the intro. Microsoft and Docker have both given me awards. I work for a local global nonprofit here in town. I'm also a friend of Redgate. AZ Give Camp is really fun. AZ Give Camp brings volunteer developers together with charities to build free software. We start building software Friday after work. Sunday afternoon, we deliver completed software to charities. Sleep is optional, caffeine provided. If you're in Phoenix, come join us for the next AZ Give Camp. Or if you'd like a Give Camp here in Salt Lake, find me here at the group or on any of the socials, or email me, and let's get a Give Camp here in your neighborhood too. Some of the other things that I've done, I run a group in Gilbert, Arizona, and also Provo, Utah. I've written some books, and one of the things I'm particularly proud of, I replied to a .NET Rocks podcast episode. They read my comment on the air, and they sent me a mug. Woo! So there's my claim to fame, my coveted .NET Rocks mug. So let's dig in. Now, we'll start out right here. I've got one file here, a site.cs proj. Let's open it in VS Code, and let's see if we can build a minimal API. Okay, so we see the site.cs proj, nothing doing there. We'll create a new file, program.cs. And now here inside program.cs, let's say using var builder equals web application dot create builder. We'll pass in the command line arguments. Var app. Oh, yes, you can create some stuff. VS Code, the folder that'll help us with debugging. We won't use that today. Var app equals builder.build. And app.run. Well, what do we want our app to do? Well, let's do this. App.map get. We'll map the slash to this function right here. New object. Message equals hello world. Well, I don't want to say hello world. I'm going to say, let's say name. And if you don't pass a name, I'll say world. And now let's take in a name on the command line, and that's our app. Let's do .NET run. It will build and run, firing up our web server here. Give it a second to compile. Especially because Teams is running, it's going to be like, no, I don't want to do the .NET run. Ooh, expected a semicolon. Yes, I forgot that one. Thank you, VS Code, for the squiggles too. .NET run. And presuming that I didn't typo something else in the 4 lines of code I just wrote. There we go. Let's pop open localhost 5000. Hello world, excellent. And we can pass in name equals slc.net, and it will say hello slc.net. If we pop open the Chrome developer tools and refresh, we can see that we got a 200. Looking at the request details, we see that it replied with application JSON. We have query string parsing. We have the correct response type. We've got a real web server in 4 lines of code. That's really cool. Now, that's where we're going to go today. But taking a look at this code, this is not the code that I wrote today. This is not the code that you wrote today. How did we get here? Is this another visual Fred? Let's take a look at it. So we'll stop this web server here. Oh, we also got logging, which is really cool. And let's come back into GitHub. And that was our bare minimum. Let's now start with an ASP.NET 5 project. This could be an ASP.NET 3.1 project or anywhere else. And we have this project right here. Now, how would I create a new minimal API project? I could come in here to Visual Studio and pick the ASP.NET Web API project template and load the project templates. Web API, and I'll give it a name. And then I have this use controllers, or if I uncheck, use minimal APIs. That will scaffold out a project. I could also come in here and say .NET new web API, and I could do -minimal, and that will get me a minimal API project as well. But let's take a look through this project. Oh, haha, it created it. I didn't hit the cancel that I expected. Move. Okay, let's fire up this ASP.NET 5 project. Now here inside this project, it's pretty much a hello world, kinda. Now there are some differences that I've done, but it looks very much like a brand new project we would see with ASP.NET 5. We have our home page, our privacy page, our about page. Well, let's take a look at how this works. Our home page is built here with MVC. And so we can come here into our home controller and we've got an index view. Let's come here into our home index and we can see that this is the view that it renders. We've got that page. But, oh, not there, here. If we come to our about page, this is actually running Razor pages. How does that work? Well, we've got here this pages folder, and here's this about page, and here's that about page that it renders. And here in our site, we also have our weather forecast, a web API, and we also have Swagger. So we have a great Swagger JSON experience inside of our app. Now, if we were to create this project with the templates, we would have gotten only one, but these things are not mutually exclusive. How does this work? Well, we saw the home controller for MVC. How did we rig that up? Here in our startup class, we say add controllers with views. It will go discover all of our controllers. It will add up all of the views. And then down here at the bottom, we say map controller route. And now we have controllers. Well, our about page was a Razor pages. How did we do that? Well, here in our IOC setup, we said add Razor pages. And then down here at the bottom, we said map Razor pages. And now all our Razor pages work. And similarly with WebAPI, we came in and said add controllers with views, and our weather forecast controller is, by the way, a controller, so it discovered it. And so that worked out really well. We've got our controllers rigged up, and then we also rigged up Swagger, and we also chose to expose Swagger and the Swagger UI here. Now we chose to do this only in development so that when we publish our application, we're not publishing the details of how our API works. If we had a public API, we might choose to move these here. But I've got a private API, so I'll put them there. Now, all of this works together. We've just rigged up all the things here in our IOC setup and in our request pipeline, and all of the methodologies work. Now, we probably wouldn't want to use all of them in one project. Maybe we would. But what I wanted to show is if you have any .NET Core 3.1, .NET Core 2.1, .NET 5 project, to upgrade it to .NET 6, or in this case, .NET 7, is like that. Yeah, we could have come here into the project properties and we could have picked it from the dropdown, but basically all it's doing is changing that number to 7. There we go. We've got a .NET 7 project. Now, the cool thing about this .NET 7 project is that our site already is going to work faster. We didn't need to do anything else. They've worked really hard inside of ASP.NET Core to minimize allocations and use span of T instead of copying strings around. And so they've done a really great job at ensuring that our website will run faster just by upgrading the target framework. If you learn nothing else from this presentation, pop open your .NET Core or .NET project, flip it to .NET 7. A .NET Framework project will probably need a little bit more work, but if you're on .NET Core, even .NET Core 1.0, that will make your site faster. Excellent. So now while we're here, let's upgrade our NuGet packages. Manage NuGet packages. Let's see if we've got any updates. We only had Swashbuckle in here so far, but it looks like there's an update for that. So we'll grab the latest and we'll update it. That's a good security practice. We want to get the latest security updates and all the things. So now let's fire up our website. We're no longer running .NET 5. We're now running .NET 6, and we can see that everything still works. We've got WebAPI, we've got Razor pages, we've got ASP.NET MVC, and all of the things just work. Here's our compiler doing all the things. It's switching from .NET 5 to .NET 6. By the way, we now have hot reload, which is excellent. Oh, actually, we're in .NET 7, and we can see that this website functions identically. Our home page run by MVC works great. Our about page run by Razor Pages works great. We can pop up our Swagger, try out our WebAPI method, and that works great too. Excellent. So we just upgraded to .NET 7. Well, now that we're here in .NET 7 and C#11, there's some other interesting things that we might want to take advantage of. Let's close all the tabs and let's pop open our home controller. Now, we spend a lot of time indenting things. Here's the namespace, we indent 4 spaces. Here's the class definition, we indent another 4 spaces. Here's the method name, we indent another 4 spaces. By the time we're doing any work, we're 12 spaces in and we haven't done anything yet. Okay, yeah, we could adjust this to 2 spaces or maybe tabs, but for the most part, our code doesn't start until 12 spaces in. That's a lot of screen real estate to lose. Look, we're wrapping already and we're not even doing anything tough yet. Well, new in C#10, and it works in C#11 as well, we can use file scope namespaces. Let me undo that and do it again. I'm just going to push the semicolon key. Visual Studio will notice, fix my curly braces, and I'm now using a file scope namespace. Now, the cool part about a file scope namespace is it applies to the entire rest of the file. Now, if I was using a designer file or I wanted to define multiple namespaces in my file, I could definitely use the old syntax in this file and the new syntax in a different file. But if the entire namespace applies to the entire file, I can just use this syntax, and that's much simpler. Look, we're only indented 8 spaces now. That's really neat. So let's run around to our project and pop open all of our C# things and convert them to file scope namespaces. Here's this model. Here's the other model. And we'll pop open startup.cs. We'll pop open program.cs. We do have a Razor page with a code behind here, so we'll do that. Let's quick look for namespace and make sure that we got them all. And yep, it looks like we did. Excellent. Any thoughts or concerns or questions so far about converting to ASP.NET 7 or using file scope namespaces?
In case people didn't notice, I got bumped out of the meeting for a minute. So if you asked a question in the chat, I didn't see it. So if you do have a question, feel free to pipe up and ask it.
Well, great. Now that we got file scope namespaces, let's take a look at another C# feature. We spend a lot of time fighting over these using statements, usually in the midst of pull requests and code reviews. Hey, did you add all the using statements that you need? Did you remove them? Did you sort them? Wouldn't it be nice if, say, we just didn't have them? Well, that's how C# works. We need namespaces. We got all the red squiggles here, but let's do something interesting. I'm going to create a new file. We'll add a new item, and I'll call this usings.cs. Now, there's no convention here. You might call it global.cs or usings.cs, but I'm going to say global using Microsoft.extensions.logging. Now, we do have this global keyword that makes it apply to every file in this project. So if we come back to that home controller and we remove this, it still works. That's perfect. So let's move all of our usings there. I'm going to grab all these usings and set them here. I'll go grab all these usings and set them here. I'll go grab all of these usings and set them there. And these usings. and all of these usings, and let's grab these usings and these usings. And then I'll do a bit of regex magic to say, let's go find the beginning of the line and put global in there, replace all the things. And I did do one bad thing because now this is global. So let's remove that. And now we get compile time help and valid code with no using statements at the top of our files. Now, if we had a using that imported a file type that was a little weird, or we had a name collision, we could still say global using blah as blah, to kind of get it there. Or if it makes sense to import a specific library into only one file, we could definitely use that. We're not prohibited from using those. It's just, so using weird lib, that still works. But now we've got all of our usings in one place, and we don't have to fight over did we sort them or remove them in the majority of our code because, well, it just doesn't have them anymore. Now we have one usings file for our entire project. And thank you, VS Code, for giving me the green squiggles, telling me I already have these in there. So we can remove these and this and this and these and these and this, and we see that we only have now 16 usings. And okay, these aren't being used. We could probably delete those. I'll leave them for now. But now if we build, we can see that our build succeeds. All of our using statements are in one place. We can sort and remove things in this one file, and everything works out great. We could definitely run our site to prove it still works, but yeah, let's focus on the next thing. So we've got global usings in place, but we notice that, hey, there's a lot of things like using system collections generic, system threading tasks. We're in an MVC ASP.NET project, so we might use ASP.NET Core, builder, hosting. These are things that, well, couldn't Microsoft just like automatically figure it out? We're using these standard libraries in our project. Couldn't it just, I don't know, do it? Yeah. Let's come into our CS proj and we'll add another property. Now we're going to say implicit usings enable. Now, if you create a new project in .NET 6 or .NET 7, it will add this property for you. But we started in .NET 5, so it wasn't here yet. Microsoft intentionally did not want to break our code by pulling in usings that we didn't expect, so they help us opt into it. Okay, so now let's build our solution. And when we build our solution, let's pop open our source code. We'll go into the obj folder of this .NET 5 project that we keep updating. Inside the debug folder, .NET 7, and we will find here site.globalusings.g.cs. This file is auto-generated when we enable implicit usings. These are all the things that Microsoft, looking at our project, this Microsoft Net SDK Web project, decided that these are good, safe default import usings. So they grabbed them all. Now here it says global using global : Why do we have the two globals? Well, because this says it is a global namespace. What if I created a file, and I said mine is namespace site.system.blah, blah, blah. Well, in that case, system is valid, and this system would be site specific, not global. And so thus they say, no, actually, it really is a global. Let's put this one back. And now we've got, nope, not that one. Now that we've got all of these things automatically imported, then let's remove them from our global usings file. I'm just going to set them at the top for a second, give Visual Studio a moment to notice the duplicates, and let's go delete these, and delete these, and delete these, and delete these, And now if we delete all of those that we temporarily put in place, we have 6 using files, 6 using lines for our entire project. Now, sorting and arguing about this is going to become really easy because it may be pretty much empty. Okay, do I want to put this one at the end? Yeah, probably. Do I want to delete this line? Yeah, probably. Okay, I'm going to be a little OCD and sort it alphabetically after that. There we go. In one file, we have all of the using statements that we need for our entire project, and there are only 5 of them. We can build our project and run it, and it will work just fine. Now, both of these are optional. We don't need to use file scope namespaces. We don't need to use global usings. We don't even need to use implicit usings. If you like the old syntax, then that's completely fine. You can use that. But if you want to be a little bit more terse, it would be great. Now, one of the things to notice when you do use file scope namespaces, we remove 4 spaces from every line. So you're about to really trash your Git history. There is a way in Git to say, but ignore this commit, and you may choose to do that for this one commit that makes everything file scope namespaces, or for legacy projects where history is really important, maybe you don't want to use file scope namespaces, but you can still use implicit usings and global usings, and that could be really elegant. Speaking of program.cs, let's actually, any thoughts or concerns or questions thus far?
So are
So
you
the
able to
global
see the question in the chat?
C# 10 feature? Yes, it is. You could be in a .NET 7 project, or you could be in a .NET 6 project, and you could use global usings.
So
Great question.
typing, sorry if you were saying more, but I noticed when you were in the project file and added the implicit usings statement that and when you moused over, it said the valid values, I think, were enable, true, and disable. Is there a difference between the behavior for enable and true?
There is not.
Okay.
But, you know, I like true. I think that's a whole lot more descriptive than enable.
Yeah.
But they support both of them. And I guess the false value is not present.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Enable is the one that they auto create, though, and that's the one that I did just as I was typing.
Yeah. A couple more questions in the chat if you can see those.
Ooh, Curtis asked a great question. What can I do? Can I name my usings file anything? Yes. I chose to name it usings.cs, but some people like to rename it as global.cs. You could also just grab these global usings and set them at the top of some file. We could even put it here in site.startup.cs. Anywhere that you want to put it is fine. And so pick a convention that works for you and set those in place there. I happen to like usings.cs because that kind of nicely maps it. But to that end, if you're in Visual Studio and you're typing your code and it notices a missing using, it will put that missing using statement at the top of your file, even if you're using mostly global usings through the project, because it doesn't know what you named it. So it can't automatically move it into that file. Alex asked a great question. Are there any performance hits or overhead with global using, like extra compile time? There is not. It's going to grab this implicit usings right here and automatically compile it into place. And this global using thing is just a compiler trick. Basically what it does is it copies all of these into the top of each thing in memory and then compiles it that way. So at the end of the day, it's exactly the same amount of running code. It doesn't perform any better or worse. It's just doing the exact same stuff. We just don't have to type stuff at the top of the file. Great question, Alex. So let's take a look at program.cs. public static void main. In console apps, that's where we look for. In Windows Forms app, we'll look for that. In WPF apps, we'll look for static void main. And so here's our static void main, our entry point into our application. Well, what's it doing? Create host builder. What's a host builder? And then build. What's build? What's run? I don't know what any of these words mean. Oh, here's create host builder. Apparently that's a thing. Oh, it's a Lambda because it only has one. Host.create default host builder. Configure. It looks like this entire thing is just this startup. This, I renamed usings. I renamed startup to usings. Let me rename startup back to startup and global back to usings. There we go. It looks like this entire thing is just a big thing for bootstrapping startup. Let's not. Let's use the new startup experience. Oh boy. Okay, so I want to say var builder equals web application dot create builder. I'll pass in the command line args, and then I need to set up IOC, and then I'll say var app equals builder dot build, and then I'll set up my request pipeline, and then I'll say app dot run. That's what that whole thing was doing. And now it's a little bit easier to understand. Okay, I'm going to go set up my IOC container. Well, that's in startup. So let's say var startup equals new startup. Well, startup seems to take some stuff. It takes some iConfiguration. So I'll pass in builder.configuration. Excellent. Now I need to set up my IOC. Oh, cool. I have a startup.configure services method. And it takes in a services. Let's pass in builder.services. And then I need to set up my request pipeline, startup.setup, configure rather. And configure takes in an app. Ooh, I have one of those. And a hosting environment, app.hosting environment, app.environment. And now we've got a much more intelligible mechanism. Okay. I want to create a builder that will set up my IOC, create an app that will configure my request pipeline and run it. Done. Now you could definitely stop here if you wanted to, but I don't see the value in separating the startup and the program file. Startup is doing this stuff and program is doing that stuff. Maybe if you like that separation of concerns, you could keep them separate, but I'm going to just yank this content out of here and put it here. Oh, I need a services. Okay, builder.services. Yeah, I could say var services equals builder.services if I wanted to, but I'm good with it. Just saying builder.services all the way around. So let's grab that and add it there and there. Now I want to set up my request pipeline. Okay, so let's go grab the contents of that method. And yeah, we might want to use some different ways to do this if we don't want this to get too long, but we can put that in place there. And it does need this environment. So let's say app.environment. And let's actually remove this whole endpoints thing and just say, we'll do that directly. Cool. And now it turns out we don't need this startup class anymore. Okay, let's go remove startup from our project. Now, new to ASP.NET and you look for the static void main, you can see exactly what it's doing. Set up the IOC container, build the request pipeline, and start up the app. Very nice. Now we can take it one step farther if we want to. For the program.cs only, we can remove the public static void main and public class part and even the namespace part, and we can just have one file that defines my static void main experience. Now, it's kind of a cheater method. If I have a really small project, then I don't have that ceremony, but I still have to do it in, say, every other file everywhere. So maybe in program.cs, I do want that piece. Yeah, I don't know. I think this would be good. Now we can build this and it will still build and run just fine. And we got to play with our new builder. That's cool. Now, if you liked having a separation between program and startup, you could definitely stop in the step before. Or if you really like the old startup experience or just don't want to mess with it and that's working for you, then you could leave the startup experience that you had before and that would work great. But I kind of like this new startup experience. I think it's a little bit more descriptive. It's a little easier to understand. Any thoughts or concerns here?
Just a quick question. Any downsides to what you did?
Ooh, any downsides? Is it going to run faster or slower? Is it easier or harder to set up? Nope, it actually runs exactly the same. In the other startup experience, we actually saw web application.create builder. We saw build and we saw run. It just did a little bit of auto magic to go discover the startup class and call those two methods. So we're just calling the content directly instead. There's no performance difference. So we've been digging into this project. This is Minimal APIs talk, and well, we haven't built minimal APIs yet. Oh, if for some reason you have to drop off early, don't forget to fill out our presenter feedback. Yes, I would really love to know how we did today. If there's a way we can do this talk better, then I welcome your feedback. So we haven't talked about minimal APIs yet. How does that fit in? Well, let's go build a minimal API. Here's our request pipeline. We have map controller routes, map razor pages. Let's say app.mapGet. Now the home page is already taken. We did that last time. The home page is taken up with our home controller here. So let's add API minimal, and we'll pass in a string name, and we'll run this. We'll return a new object. We'll say message equals hello name and world if you don't pass one, and then we'll end that. And now we've got a minimal API in our project. Minimal APIs, razor pages, WebAPI, MVC, they can all play in one project. Oh, let's quote world. Excellent. Gary, you have an interesting question. Links? Ah, there's a tiny URL right above you. Is that the link you're looking for the presenter for feedback?
Yeah, that
Yes,
tiny URL link should take you to the user group feedback and prize entry form.
So we did a get. We could also say app.map put, and let's play with URLs. API minimal 1, 2, just like we were doing attribute routing in MVC and WebAPI. So now let's take in string 1 and int 2, and then let's run this function that will return a new message. Let's give the message 1 and ID 2. Cool. I'm going to put this lambda on a second line just so that we can see it a little bit better. We could also do more logic here. Let's say map post. And I'll do, actually, this one is post, and this one is put. I'm going to say API minimal and let's get it to run this function. I'm going to take in a object data, and I'm going to do more stuff. Well, I want to say bool valid equals true. Let's go validate our input data. If not valid, return this dot bad request. And otherwise, we will save to the database and return this dot OK data. Cool. Although the performance of the application has been the same thus far, eliminating the controllers and MVC functionality improves performance a lot. You're correct, Caleb. The minimal API functionality actually lives at a lower level than MVC. They actually lifted up MVC, put in WebAPI underneath, and stuck MVC back on top. So under the hood, MVC uses minimal APIs as its execution thing. Okay. So we now have some errors because this. Well, in controllers, we say this dot view, this dot error, this dot OK, or we could just return the results. But here in this minimal API, we can't, because what is this? Well, this is this lambda right here. And this lambda is, well, it doesn't have a bad request method on it. So let's reach for results. Results.badRequest. Results is go there. There we go. Results is this partial class that returns these iResult things, and it has a whole bunch of different methods that do interesting things. Well, what is iResult? It looks a lot like the action result that we had before, where we just have some execute method that takes in a context and does stuff. Now, some of these bad, like bad request or OK, return very specific types of results that allow us to do interesting things. We could say return results dot not found. We could say return results dot unauthenticated, unauthorized. We could do lots of different things, or we could build our own iResult, much like we built our own action result. Cool. So we'll say bad request. We might pop in that. We've got our OK, and we're doing pretty good. Now, I want to add a little bit more structure to this. So I'm going to add a new model. I'll create a new item, minimal model.cs. And here, file scope namespaces are amazing. Public int ID, get set. Public string message, get set. Public minimal model data, get set. And, oh, thank you for the, oh, I lost it. Nullable reference types. Cool. So now that we have a minimal model, let's come back here into our program.cs. And now I'm going to return a new minimal model here instead of just a thing. I'll give it an ID here. Here is a minimal model, and I'll just say ID is, I don't know, 7. And oh, let's make that a non-blank message. There we go. We'll take in a minimal model and we'll return that. We might even say new minimal model saved successfully. And ID is 7 and the data is here. Cool. Oh, we need to give it a message. There we go. We just added a little bit more structure to it, and that's looking great. Well, now how might we test this app? Well, in the past, we would have to fire up a web server and look for an available port, and that works out well, but that's kind of a long way to go. Alternatively, we could just do unit tests where we just call our controllers directly, but now we're not getting the full request pipeline. So let's actually close this project, file, close solution, and back inside of, we just live coded all of these. Now let's open up the testing project here. Testing. Let's open up that solution. And just to get us typing a little, avoid some typing, we now have a unit test. Now this unit test just grabs the weather forecast controller and calls the get method. Now I'm using XUnit in this case. XUnit is the unit test framework that ASP.NET team uses, so I'm good with that. But, well, oh, actually, I didn't set up my demo. There we go. If we just create a new weather forecast controller, we need to pass in this logger. Now, yeah, we could just go delete the logger. Apparently, we're not using it, but let's talk about dependencies in tests. I'm here in my unit test, and I want to pass in a dependency. So in this case, I'm using MOQ, MOQ or mock. Yeah, now that they've started doing adware in it, maybe I want to flip over to end substitute, but this one works so far. Let's go create this mock, and it's just going to implement this interface. I don't care what it does. That's not important to my test. Go set that up. I'm going to take that implementation and pass it into my controller, and that works out great. Or we can use dependency injection here. Now, AutoMocker is a great way to do dependency injection in the middle of tests. We can register various mocks with the IOC container if we need that mock for our tests. Or in this case, I just said, go get me an instance, and it will go find all the dependencies, fill them with mocks, and I'll be able to get my thing, and it will just automatically create mocks for me. It's amazing. So in the same way that we use dependency injection in our regular project, we use dependency injection here to be able to go set up our tests really easily. And then later, if we end up with more dependencies in here, I want to grab an IFU service, then we don't need to change our test because, well, the test isn't passing parameters to the constructor. AutoMocker is figuring it out for us. Now I'm going to delete that so that my build compiles. So here's a unit test. Now I'm also using fluent assertions. Fluent assertions is great because we just say, go do the thing. Previously, I would have said assert dot that expected actual, and well, wait, no, but I think actual goes here and expected goes there. I once spent a few hours trying to debug my test because it told me that the actual was 7 and expected was 5. And I debugged it and I got 5. I didn't get 7. So I'm like, but it works. Turns out I had these backwards. And so 7 was the right answer and I only got 5. So that's what fluent assertions does really well, is I can say actual.should.be expected. And at that point, then I have a really elegant way of describing my things. Now, I do have a assertion scope so that it will run all of my assertions and then error if any of them happen. That can be perfect for being able to say, okay, I fixed one and then I commit it again and then it runs and then it fails on the next assertion. It'll just run all of them. Great. So for a unit test, I've got this in place, and let's run our test. And we can see that our test would fail if the build didn't fail for a very different reason. Now, I want to go do an integration test. So let's set up our integration tests. Well, I'm going to do this weather integration test, and I'm going to go create a new instance of this site fixture. Now, what is this site fixture? Well, this is new in .NET 6. And so I can create a web application factory of my type. Here's my program.cs. And now I can create host and I can override it. Let's go find my DB context and remove it, and then add a fake DB context. I can swap out my instances with mocks if I need to. And then I now have an instance of my app that is running. I didn't need to figure out the ports. It doesn't actually start up the web server on a particular port. It does it all in memory, but it's going to run the full request pipeline. So back here in my weather integration test, we create a new instance of this fixture, and then we create an HTTP client from that. Now we know how to use HTTP client. We use that all the time. But now when I use my HTTP client to go call things, it will go call that other website. So I'm going to call the API/weather forecast, and then I can get the response, read it as a string, deserialize it into a list, and validate the results. Now, I don't know what weather forecasts it picked, but I do know that there are 5 of them. So I'll just validate that there are 5. I don't want to say, well, it's 32 degrees or 38 degrees. If I wanted to get a little bit more intense, I could start to override random. Maybe I need to wrap random in a service that I can inject so that I can produce dependable, reliable results in my test. But for this test, I'll just say it should have 5, and I think that's sufficient. So now we can go create our integration test. And so here's API/weather forecast, and we can do all the things. Here's our minimal API, and we pass in API/minimal name equals test. So that should, when we deserialize it, it should say hello test. There's our get method. We can test our post method in a similar way. Let's post this request body, and let's validate that it returned 5, because apparently last time I did this demo, I hard-coded it as 5. And so now we've got this to work. With one exception, when we build this, we can see that here in site app, our fixture, it says it can't get at program. Program is inaccessible due to its protection level. Let's pop open program.cs and take a look at it. Where's my public void main and my public class thing? Well, by default, when it constructs this class, it says private class program, and then public static void main. And so it did that behind the scenes. And so how do I make it public? How do I get at this? Well, actually, the way it built it was it did a partial class. That's how it auto-generated it. So what if I implement, I don't know, the other half of that partial class and make it public? Now, this is such a hack, so I'm going to document it. Make generated class public for tests. And now it's a public class. I can build this. It will build successfully. I can open up the test explorer. I have it docked right here. We can run all of our tests, and we see that not only do the unit tests pass, but the integration tests pass as well. We just validated our entire site, both unit and integration tests, without having to spin up a web server, without having to locate a free port. That's really cool. Any thoughts or concerns on testing?
There was a question in the chat in the middle of this section where Curtis Stacy asked, you're not required to make the app.mapGet method calls in program.cs, right?
Ooh, good point. Let's flip back to that solution where we had done that, and let's play with it a little bit. Because I agree, this program.cs is getting kind of long. I don't really want all this stuff in here. Let's imagine that we have, I don't know, 6 entities in our application, 4 methods per. I'm going to, of course, add mine at the end. And you're, of course, going to add yours at the end. So we're all going to hit merge conflicts every time we do this. What if I could, I don't know, move this into an extension method or something? Let's do that. I'm going to create a new folder. I don't know, I'll just call it APIs. I'll create a new file inside APIs, and I'll call it minimal.cs. It already exists. Let me go delete it. There we go. Add new item, minimal.cs. And file scope namespaces for the win. Let's come back here into program.cs. Let's rip all of this out of there and put that, I don't know, here. And I'm going to go grab this get method, and I'll say public void get. And it actually isn't void, it's a minimal model. And let's grab this post. Public minimal model post. Public result put. And I'll go grab all of this stuff out of there. It's not a lambda anymore, it's just a regular function. And now I have a class that has all these methods in it. Now I could put this stuff back in here and say app.mapGet minimal.get and minimal.post and minimal.put, but we're still hitting that merge conflict spot where let's see if we can go a little bit farther. So I'm going to say public void init, and I'll take in an app web application, and I'll say, let's say this dot get and this dot post and this dot put. And so we built this initialization method. And now back here in program.cs, we can say var minimal equals new minimal dot init. But we actually have IOC, so let's actually say app.get required app.services.get required service of type minimal dot init app. And if we wanted to get really fancy, we could say this, and now it's an extension method, but it can't be in a stateful class, so I'm going to back that back out for now. And we don't need that using. And now I have one line. So you're going to create one, and I'm going to create one, and now we can avoid that merge conflict by, well, I'll just take mine and then yours, or yours and then mine. And now it works out really well to be able to add these new APIs into my thing. Did that answer your question, Curtis? But now I'm looking at this and I'm like, well, what does this look like? This kind of looks like a controller. Why did it go all this way just to use minimal APIs if I wanted to build controllers? Because with controllers, I didn't need to do this registration step. I just say add controllers with views, and it just automatically finds all the things. I think we have gone too far here. I think this would be better as controller base, and then I don't need this init thing anymore. And now I've got minimal model. Is that nullable? Oh, it doesn't like iResult. It wants it to be iActionResult. And now I can use this and this. And yeah, now it's a controller. Cool. We took minimal APIs too far. Minimal APIs is a great piece if I have a very small project. But if I have more than, I don't know, a few methods, maybe half a dozen methods, then minimal API is probably not a good fit. If I have an enterprise application, I should upgrade to MVC or WebAPI. If I have an even smaller project, I might choose to upgrade to Azure Functions or AWS Lambda or Kubernetes functions. But if I have that one perfect little project, then I can upgrade to minimal APIs and we can do that. Let's close this solution and take a look at a project that is about the right size. So back here in GitHub, we'll grab this right size project and let's take a look at right size. Now this right size project is this. I have this interesting config file, and my request is I just need to put this online. Does the mapping of HTTP methods happen automatically if you use the method names get, post, or do you need to annotate them? Great question. If I have a thing public void public class some controller base, then yes, thank you for helping me with my JSON. Public void get. Yes, trying to type C# in a JSON file is hard. It's not going to automatically grab that. So I would need to say HTTP get. I could also annotate it with API controller, which would give it a little bit more things. And at that point, then I could remove this and it would automatically wire up get methods to get. That API controller attribute is magic at being able to do exactly what you're looking for, Gary.
Thanks.
Yeah. So back here, let's take a look at our interesting config. My job is to take this interesting config and put it online. Or maybe I want to accept an HTTP post and just send an email. Or maybe I want to have a webhook that just transforms the data in an interesting way. We have this one little need where previously we would, I don't know, go reach for a node or another technology, but it's like, no, I want to do this in C#. In this project is exactly one C# file. Just this C# file. I don't have anything else. I don't have any wacky stuff. I just have this one C# file right here, program.cs. I'm going to start off creating my web application builder. I'll take in my command line args if I have them, and then I'll add endpoints API Explorer, add health checks. Let's go read that interesting config, and I'll deserialize it as a strongly typed object. Here's this record class down here, so I can define that class in one line. I'll then validate that it's not null, and I'll add it to my IOC container. Now I chose to put it in curly braces just so that I couldn't cheat and leverage this JSON file later. I would need to get it out of my IOC container. But now I go grab map get, let me grab that out of my IOC container, and I will return it. So let's run this website and check out if we've got our interesting config running. And here is a website with that interesting config. Now, like any good website, I probably need some Swagger documentation. So let's add the Swagger piece in there, and I can call my interesting config and I can get that result back. How did we wire that up? Well, we set up here, add Swagger gen. We also said add endpoints API Explorer, so it would discover all my methods without having to annotate them with 1,000 parameters. Then we said use Swagger and Swagger UI, and that gave us that really elegant interface. Well, if we have an endpoint like this, we might want to, I don't know, do not found handling. So not valid page, and we've got endpoint 404 handling too. If we pop this open in our Chrome developer tools, we can see that we did get a 404 status. How did we do that? Well, back here in our project, we said, let's go grab any URL. This star says not just the next parameter, but all the parameters. And let's return results.notfound. I'll give it a cool message. What I was doing before was just a blank thing. And what I noticed was it was giving me the Chrome page. And I was like, oh, wait, no, my server is running. I need to give it more details. So I gave it a new JSON object and now it ran. Okay, and we also probably want error handling. So let's go to error and we've got a great thing. We've also got a 500. How did that work? Well, we have this built-in use exception handler that forwards to error. So let's just grab error and return results.problem. Perfect. And we probably also want health checks in here. So let's come to health. And now it returns healthy. And that's great. We can expose that through Docker as a maintenance endpoint. We can grab that in Kubernetes as a wellness health check. And how do we rig that up? We said map health checks here, and we said add health checks there. All of this, including the hack to do testing of this, in 46 lines of C# in one file. This is the right size for a web API project. We wanted a little piece, but we got a full API. We've got query string handling, we've got correct status codes, we've got health checks, error handling, and not found handling, all in 46 lines of code. This is a good fit for minimal APIs. If you have lots of entities, you probably want to upgrade to Web API. If you have an even smaller project than this, or you don't want to keep track of the request, you might choose to upgrade to Azure Functions or Knative Functions. But here, when you have this very specific small problem and you want to take control of your request process, then minimal APIs is the perfect solution for being able to do exactly that. What's really cool is that this project, together with all the steps that we built, is up here on this GitHub project. The URL is github.com/robrich/minimalapis-ASP.NET. Or if it's easier, go to robrich.org, click on presentations, and you can download all of this. All the steps that we took tonight are in this project. And so I would invite you to clone this repository, perhaps follow these steps yourself, and see if you get a different solution, in which case, send me a pull request and I can make this project better. All of this is available in ASP.NET 6 and 7, C# 10 and 11, and it is available right now. Upgrade to Visual Studio 2019 or 2022, and you can take advantage of minimal APIs. Any thoughts or concerns or questions with minimal APIs or anything in .NET or ASP.NET or C#?
We do have a question about authentication and authorization, how that's handled with minimal APIs in the chat.
Ooh, great question. How do I do authentication? Well, what I would like to do is I would like to add this authorize attribute here, but that doesn't really take effect. It's for this app.map method. So I want to put it here on my Lambda, but that's not really how Lambdas work. They're working to make that work, by the way. It's going to be really cool. So I can say require authorization. And that is the way to do it in minimal APIs. To be able to say this, I could also give it details about what authorization roles or claims I need there. Or I could even take advantage of it and say, oh, and by the way, call my method and I'll validate if that's right. We have use HTTP redirection, use routing, all the normal things. So we could say app.use authentication. And now we've rigged up that authentication and authorization system inside of our minimal API. That was a great question, Matt. Thanks for that. Well, if you're watching this on demand later, find me on Mastodon, robrich@hashiderm.io, or robrich.org gets you access to all the other socials. But for those of us who are here in the room, what are your thoughts? What are your concerns? What are you going to use minimal APIs for?
Encouragement to do more microservices rather than just lump things into, what's convenient.
Yes. Breaking monoliths into microservices is a great use of minimal APIs.
Does anybody else have any other comments
It's
or
been a lot of
questions?
fun getting to show you minimal APIs with ASP.NET. Thanks for coming to slc.net today. And I'll hand it back to you, Gary.
Great, thank you. We are so grateful for the effort you put into this presentation. It was really fantastic. I learned a lot. I know from the comments that came out, people had some great questions and were able to learn a lot. I think there are going to be a lot of opportunities to use minimal APIs in the future. So yeah, thank you very much.
Most definitely.
Before we move on, does anybody have any other questions for Rob?
I'm thinking about using it to log data from some IoT things around my house. Yes, I've done it with exactly that as well, because now I can just accept HTTP requests from random IoT things or even MQTT things. And then now I have the full power of .NET to be able to log it and do interesting things, or even taking it a step further, run .NET on my Raspberry Pi and pull the details out of the IO pins, GPIO pins. Great thought, Alex.
Hey, not so much a question, but I just wanted to thank you, Rob, for your presentation and all the cool stuff that we got to learn.
Most definitely.